Hello everyone, bringing you a video today talking about this, and this is a British issue, 1957 pattern bush jacket, very kindly lent to me by my friend Alan to make this video, and it nicely fills a gap in the jungle green clothing. Obviously I've made videos on the 1950 pattern and other jungle green clothing. This is an item I don't have. It's also a sealed pattern, which is why we have the little white tag here on one of the buttonholes. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as we move through. We'll have a look at the sealed pattern label, which is on this. Sealed pattern, of course, meaning that this is a pattern that's been approved for future manufacture. Essentially, this has been presented, it's been approved, rubber stamped and sealed as being how the garment should be made. It's up to spec, basically. Quite an interesting design. It moves on from the 1950 pattern, which had been standardised in both khaki and green. As far as I'm aware, the 1957 pattern was only made in green, so it's kind of a break from the 1950 pattern, which had standardised a single uniform made in khaki and green. And it's a bush jacket which would continue to be worn with the 1950 pattern trousers. So it doesn't have a set of trousers as part of the uniform. It's a new design of bush jacket as a standalone. It introduces several features which perhaps would have been good to have on the 1950 pattern when first introduced, which make it more suitable as a field garment. And it can also be very smart, as we have it here with the belt and everything attached. So we'll talk a little bit more about the details of this now. You'll notice one of the first things, we only have the two breast pockets here, nicely scalloped flaps on there, obviously pleated. As you can see, we don't have any pockets in the skirts. There's no pockets here at all, in contrast to the 1950 pattern. Big wide lapels there. You do have a top button, which is attached permanently. This is sewn on. It's a small battle dress type button. And they obviously that is sewn on as opposed to the rest, which, as we'll see, are attached with rings in the same way as they were on denim uniform, for example. It's made in Airtex, very dark green Airtex. Obviously this is a sealed pattern, so unissued, obviously, and you can see obviously in a pristine condition. This is how dark the green was originally. A lot of them you see these days have been worn in the field and have faded, and this is a nice example of how dark the green of these is and the 1950 pattern when initially issued. Waist belt here with the standard British two-prong buckle in brass, and this belt is removable, as we'll see as we move this round, in contrast to the 1950 pattern where it is sewn in at the rear and basically from the hips it comes forward as a loose belt and can be buckled up. This is removable, something of a recognition of field modification of the 1950 pattern, where the belt was often removed for use in the field because permanently attached and having the buckle there, it's really not something you want on a field uniform, but it looks very smart. So this is a nice halfway house, I suppose. With the inclusion of the belt, it can be smartened up, but with the removal of the belt, it actually is a relatively practical field garment. Although Airtex obviously has its detractors because it's quite a lightweight and not a very hard wearing cloth. It was what the British Army was using at the time. The sleeves, very simple opening at the cuff there with a single button, and this is probably one of the easiest places to show you the function of these buttons. It might not be actually, this is a little sleeve. No, you can turn that back. You can see there we have the buttons attached using a ring, as I say, exactly the same way. You have a hole stitched into the cloth and the shank of the button pokes through, and then you just attach a ring there. So the buttons are removable, and this is important for laundering. Tropical clothing is heavily and regularly laundered. If you make the buttons removable, you're less likely to see the buttons damaged in the process of what can be quite energetic laundering, shall we say. We'll move this round now and have a look at the sides and the back. Looking at the left-hand side of the uniform here, we can see the epaulette, and this again is attached with a removable shank button, as you can see there. These are obviously, these buttons very similar to those used on the epaulettes and the dressing pocket of some battle dress patterns, and also on denim uniform as well, certainly later on. You can see here again the cuff. If I unbutton this and open it up to show you the actual cuff design, it's just a very simple single button cuff there. There's no gussets or anything, it just opens up like that. And as I say, made in this Airtex fabric, which, to describe it, is similar to football shirt material. It's cellular, so it does allow, it's very breathable, allows air to circulate. It's the opposite of windproof. It's designed to allow ventilation to help in cooling the body. We'll move this around now and have a look at the back. Looking at the back of the uniform here, you can see there's a seam across the shoulders there, and then we have these pleats sewn in at the rear here. We do have vents. We have a vent on each side in the skirts there, as you can see, similar to 1950 pattern in that regard. And you can see the belt here is loose from the jacket. It's not sewn on. You can remove that, and you have consequently have belt loops on each side. The belt is actually attached with a buttoned loop, so it's not just threaded through the belt loops. There is also a buttoned loop on the belt which actually attaches it to the jacket, so once unbuckled it doesn't just fall out of the belt loops. And that consequently, well, we'll move this around and have a look at the right hand side, and I'll just mention the little sealing detail there. If I just move the right arm out of the way, lift that up here, we can see we have the belt loop here, and there is another piece of white tape round here. The reason for that, you can see the seam here. We'll have a look at this in more detail in just a moment. There is actually a cord here with a sealing wax on it to ensure the belt cannot be removed from the sealed pattern. Obviously that's important because the belt is removable and you don't want it disappearing from the sealed pattern because it is part of the sealed pattern. So there's actually a piece of cord here with sealing wax on it on the knot to ensure that the belt is not removed from the sealed pattern. That's an interesting little detail of the fact that it is a sealed pattern. We'll have a look at the details of the belt now, and then we'll move this around and turn it inside out and have a look at the details inside. We'll take a look at the sealed pattern label as well. So I have the belt unfastened here, and as you can see on this side of the belt, within the belt loop there is a second smaller belt loop underneath, and then this piece on the belt here. Now that attaches to a button. Turn this around like that, you can see there's this piece on the back of the belt which comes through here, goes through a loop on the jacket, and then buttons up to here. So the belt is held captive. And you can see what I mean here about the piece of cord which has been attached, and then that's been sealed with wax to ensure that this cannot be removed from the sealed pattern. And that ensures, of course, that it remains as part of the sealed pattern. It's not going to get lost. But you can remove the belt by unbuttoning this and just pulling this loop out of this smaller belt loop on the inside here, and then the belt will just pull out of the full-size belt loops, and it's fully removable in that regard. But it's interesting that they included this little detail here so that once it's attached to the jacket, you button it on and you can unfasten the belt without worry of it just falling out of the belt loops and falling to the ground. So that is an interesting little detail of the uniform here. So just before we turn this inside out, I've just taken the sealed pattern label out from inside the jacket where I had it tucked away. You can see the seal there on an old piece of wool cloth. These were stamped onto pieces of cloth. Obviously that stamped, the seal is stamped over the knot attaching the label to the jacket, as you can see there. And we have this paper cloth label, and I'll show you the two sides of this in more detail now. I'll just show you some close-ups of the label. Here you can see the label which has been attached by seal to the jacket, and it has the standard pattern number up the top there, and then the specification, the catalogue number, and then we have the designation, which is jacket bush green 1957 pattern cellular, and then you can see at the bottom there the actual date that this has been approved and sealed, and that's 22nd of August 1958, so relatively late in 1958. And this is a good example of how the pattern designation of a garment doesn't necessarily mean it was issued that year. Obviously this is not approved until fairly late in 1958. It's unlikely these would have reached the troops until 1959. So it just goes to show that, particularly in peacetime, there is a lag time between pattern designation and when garments are actually issued out. And then on the other side of the label, we have the various companies this has been issued to, along with the dates and the inspector's initials, obviously to keep a record of this being issued out to assist various companies in manufacturing the garment. Okay, so here we have the inside of the jacket, and as you can see we have double thickness on each side where the buttonholes run through, and on this side that protects or covers up the buttons, the back of the buttons where the rings are attached, in order to fix them to the front there. So they're very easy to remove. You just peel that back and take the rings out and the buttons pop out. You can see again the darts that have been put in here to nip it in around the waist, create quite a smart look. And then we have the label here, which I'll get a close-up of now. Here we can see the actual garment label, and you can see the designation is repeated here, jackets bush green 1957 pattern cellular in full. And then we have the size 7, which is height 5'9" to 5'10", breast 36 to 38 inches, and waist 31 to 33 inches. And then we have the manufacturer GDS and the date of 1957, obviously this being manufactured as the sealed pattern for the 1957 pattern bush jacket. So that is a look at the British 1957 pattern bush jacket. There's one final thing I'll mention with this, which I failed to earlier on, when talking about the fact there are no lower pockets. One thing that this does allow, which was quite common with the 1950 pattern previously, was the propensity of British troops to tuck them in and wear them as a shirt. And obviously, as I say, this was done with the 1950 pattern. You see it in photos of troops out in the jungle. You also see it in Aden with the khaki version, the khaki drill version. As I say, it's an interesting sort of concession in the design to the propensity of British soldiers to wear these tucked in as shirts, and you can do, and you frequently see them worn that way when they are worn. They don't turn up too often in photographs, but when you do see them, they're very often tucked in with the belt removed. So, as I say, a concession to what British troops ended up doing with them, rather than wearing them as bush jackets, quite commonly wearing them as shirts tucked in. Having said these don't show up very often, there is some excellent colour footage on YouTube from Pathé News. It's a little short film called Ambush, which was filmed in 1964, which is based on operations in the Malayan Emergency more than those in Borneo, because it essentially has the antagonists are communist terrorists, essentially. But it's rather well made, and it's an interesting reference from the point of view of how kit was put together and so forth, and also uniform. And one of the chaps in that is wearing one of these tucked in as a shirt. As already said, that seems to be the most common way they were worn. So I'll link to that. I'll put a card that's in 2 reels. I'll put a link to reel 1 in the corner here. Well worth the watch. It's quite interesting, sort of showing the British jungle kit from that sort of time period. And it's quite clear colour footage, so a useful reference from that point of view. But that's everything I wanted to cover in this video, I think. Obviously, if you find this sort of content interesting and you'd like to see more, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And if you're new to subscribing or you've already subscribed, do make sure you hit the little bell, the little notification button down below, which will obviously allow you to be alerted of when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you'd like to support the channel, you can do. There's both a PayPal and a Patreon link down below. And thank you very much once again to everybody who supports me using those 2 methods. It's greatly appreciated, and thank you very much once again. There's also social media for the channel. There's Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, all linked down below, should you wish to follow the channel over there. And if you want to make contact but you don't really use social media, you can do. There is an email address down below as well. But that's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.